Alright, I'll try and make this as quick as long as I can. What we're looking at here is a 10.4 kilowatt solar system. It makes around 13,000 kilowatt hours of power a year. It's based on about 5 hours of sunlight a day, I do believe. There's 40 Astro Energy solar panels here, 4 rows of 10. Each panel is rated at 260 watts per panel, and each panel creates about 1 amp pretty consistently. Now on the back of these panels, I'll just show you, but come back to a little bit later. There's an Enphase M250 microinverter. 1 microinverter for every panel. That right there, that little fella blinking there is the microinverter. Basically, he turns the power from DC, from that little fella there, that's attached to the back of the panel, comes out of there DC, and goes into him DC, and comes out AC. Where do we start here? Okay. These rails you see that the panels are mounted to, these rails right here. There's another one there. Another one there. These rails are the Iron Ridge mount rails, and they are the XR1000 model. Now, going to the basic setup of this thing first. Notice which way these rails, or these XR1000 rails, are situated, because it is crucial to how you're going to mount your panels. Basically, they face one another. In this case, you've got your flat side spaced about maybe 3.5 feet, maybe. Flat side faces flat side for each row that the panel is attached to. Now, if you've ever built anything in your life, or laid a shingle, or put down a metal roof, you pretty much know that you should lay your first 3 rows of panels in succession to make sure you're not running uphill or downhill on your XR1000 rails. Pretty much, if you keep the bottom row straight, your top row is going to follow. Now, that being said, a little bit more on the construction side of the house. You see these pipe. These pipe are what I'll refer to as a subframe. The XR1000 rails are the frame. This is a subframe or a substructure. These pipe are Schedule 40 3-inch pipe. You'll get these specs from the power company. If you do a ground mount system, they'll send these specs to you, let you know what you need. These pipes in the back, they go, I want to say, I do believe they go 5 foot into the ground at the back, because they're so tall. And the ones at the front, they go 3 foot into the ground, if memory serves right. The caps for connecting your subframe to your XR1000 frame are right there. You can see the U-bolt underneath the plugs there. There's the U-bolt. Okay, that'll allow you to connect your XR1000 rails to your substructure. Now, the vertical rail, or the horizontal rails connected to the vertical rails for the 3-inch pipe, will also come from the supplier. It'll look something like that. Okay, now we've covered our substructure, our actual mounting frame, panels, how much output they're doing. Let's take a look at putting them together, the wiring, components. Okay, on the back of each solar panel, there's a DC inverter. It comes with the panel from their manufacturer. That little sucker right there takes the sun's power, converts it to DC. Okay, now from that DC inverter, it'll follow it down to these Enphase M250 microinverters, which convert the power to AC. Everything on these are very easy. These are plug and play. Those 2 wires come off the DC inverter. From the manufacturer, they're attached to the panel. Okay, then from there you follow them around, and you'll just plug them right into the microinverter. Easy enough. Okay, now the microinverter plugs into, yes, it just plugs right into it, plugs into these things called trunk cables. Okay, that is your trunk cable. Every row of panels, I have 4, has a trunk cable. So I have a total of 4 trunk cables. I have 2 on each vertical pipe, or 2 on each horizontal pipe. There's one there. You come around here, you'll see the one for the other side. It runs all the way down. More about that in a minute. My first row of panels, see if I can zoom out here. That's row 1 of panels right there, if you can see the joints. Okay, and that's row 2 of panels. My row 1 of panels ties in the trunk cable here at the front, as you can see. DC inverter. You can't, it's kind of hard to see, but your DC ties in your AC, and your AC plugs right in your trunk cable. Okay, that's row 1 panels. Row 2 panels. Row 2 panels do the same thing. DC inverter to the AC inverter into the trunk cable. Now if you go up to row 3 panels, row 3 panels are the same thing. Trunk cable, and there's another trunk cable on the other side for my row 4 panels. Does the same thing. Alright, now these trunk cables, what's inside of these trunk cables after you plug in the microinverter is simply 12-3 wire. It's 12-3 stranded wire. Basically like you'd run for a 2-way switch. Now that being said, these trunk cables, you'll tie in every microinverter into these trunk cable plugs. And you'll tie in every DC inverter into your microinverter. Now these trunk cables, they'll run the full length of the structure. Alright, it's going to run all the way down. I won't confuse you, we'll keep it simple with this part up here. I don't know if you can see it or not because of the sun. Yeah. Okay, these trunk cables, they all have to come to an end. They run the vertical pipe all the way out to whatever side of the solar panel array you are going to have your sub panel on. Okay, now these trunk cables, they drop into an outside junction box. Again, they're going to drop into that outside junction box on the side of the solar panel array that your sub panel is going to be located on. We'll come back to that too. Now, that 12-3 wire from that trunk cable drops into the outside junk box. Alright. Now, depending on your distance, I would just do it anyway. I spliced together inside that junction box the 12-3 to solid strand wire number 10 THHN, which is just a fancy way of saying it's high heat wire. It's referred to as THHN wire, and it was number 10 gauge. Okay. Now, once I made that tie-in in there, I dropped into this flexible conduit. Well, wet location, weather rated, necessary for code. I dropped into that. Okay. Now from that flexible conduit, I hooked up into these. I do believe they should be schedule 80. Rigid PVC conduit should be schedule 80, 3/4 inch. Because something else I forgot. Coming out of that junction box, I'm pretty sure you're going to have the 4 wires. You're going to have the 2 hot legs, and you're going to have a ground and a neutral, if memory serves me. I'm pretty sure. But either way, you're going to tie in there with number 10 THHN wire. Okay, again, flexible conduit into rigid PVC conduit, schedule 80. It's 3/4 inch. Take note of how it's fastened to the frame with the galvanized banding. Right there. Galvanized banding, stainless steel nuts and bolts. Okay, now it drops into that 3/4 inch labeling. Labeling's not just for looks, it's per National Electric Code. I think they want labeling. Once you hit conduit, I think they want labeling every 2 feet. It looks like I've got it maybe every 3 feet or 4 feet. You'll have to check the National Electric Code for labeling on that. And they referred to it as DC solar circuit labeling and not AC. There was no AC, so I just followed a DC, and the the inspector had no problem with that. Again, note the banding, same deal. Now that's schedule 80 3/4 inch. It picks up here with the flexible conduit again, right there. Flexible conduit follows the frame all the way down, 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 and it picks up two more schedule 40 on the PVC conduit on the angles. I don't think they make an 80. And again, it picks up flexible conduit here from, I'll just show you, from the other two rows of panels and their outside junction boxes. So altogether you're going to have four flexible conduits. Okay, now these come down, they drop right into the bottom of my sub panel. And again, like I said, your junction panel should be mounted at the end of your trunk cable on whichever end that your sub panel box is going to be located. Since we're on the trunk cable topic, now you're probably asking yourself, well, that's fine, but what do you do with the other end of the trunk cable that's not on the same side as your sub panel box? Well, the manufacturer will also send you these high-speed little things right here. I don't know how well you can see them or not, but basically they're just fancy outside wire nuts for wet locations. And that's how you'll, because you'll have to cut this trunk cable to length. But yeah, that's what those look like. And those will be on the opposite side of your trunk cable where your sub panel is not located. Now that said, those outside junction boxes, and well, I'll tell you how many's in there. Yeah, so I was right, there are four. There are four wires coming out of each outside junction box where your trunk cable ties in with your number 10 THHN. There are four wires in there, 12-3. AWG going in for the trunk cable and number 10 coming back out. Now, I showed you the conduit and how to run a wire on the conduit. Now that conduit, tie all four of those flexibles, tie into the bottom of this sub panel box. Alright, this sub panel box you're going to need, in my case I needed 15 amp double pole breakers. I needed 4 of them, one for each row of panels. So, and if you should know how to wire, I'll just give you a quick PME on it. Your 2 hots, in my case I labeled on my red and my black. That's the other thing. Whenever you tie in your outside junction box, make sure you label your THHN wire accordingly, so you'll know if one wire ties into your red wire on your trunk cable. When you drop in your sub panel box, you'll know which wire was that red THHN wire that you tied into on your junction box for the 12-3 trunk cable wire. Do the same thing, color code every strand of wire that you tie into the outside junction box so you can keep it straight when it drops into your sub panel. But your 2 hot legs go into your double pole breaker, and you can bust your neutral, and there should be, was that wrong? No, you bust your neutral and your ground wire in your outside sub panel box. There's your ground, there's neutral. Now we'll come back to this in a minute, but you pick your neutral up. You're going to pick your neutral, what's the word I'm looking for here? You're going to pick your neutral connectivity up from your main house panel. I'll show you more about that in a minute. Now your ground bus bar, you're going to pick your ground up for that off the structure itself and the main house panel. But as you can see, that number 6 bare copper ground right there, that's the structure ground. Okay, and what it does is it runs out the bottom of my box here. It runs out. I'm going to show you. No need to get that fancy with it, but it runs out, follows the pipe. Oh, and this is something else I forgot to show you. It runs up along the structure, and you'll notice that it drops, it connects. The manufacturer will give you connectors, but it connects and touches on every XR1000 rail. Those are power lines, don't pay any attention to those. Okay, and it's going to go for the entire structure. Again, it's crucial that number 6 bare copper ground touches on every XR1000 rail. Now, something I forgot to show you, every panel can barely see it here, but every panel is grounded to the XR1000 rail, which is grounded through the number 6 bare copper ground with what they call a Weeb DMC clip. And barely see the little fella. He's real thin, but he has teeth on him, and he cuts into the aluminum frame on every solar panel, and he cuts into the XR1000 rail. A real small fellow. Let's see if it'll focus here. I doubt it. But that's him right there. You can barely see him. And that's how you ground your solar panels to the XR1000. And that's how the XR1000 grounds to your sub panel box. Now, once you've ran all your number 10 wire into your sub panel box and you've connected your number 6 to your ground bus bar, now what you got to do is you got to run back to your house. You got to run back to your main panel in your house. Now what you're going to do that is these wires right here. Okay, these are number 6 wire, and as you can see, each one's also color coded. Black is black, red is the other hot, and you got your neutral white and your ground. Again, these are number 6, and they're wired up just as you see them here. Your 2 hot legs on your sub panel box, and then they come around and they drop right out the bottom. Again, these have to be indexed. If you get an inspector, especially when you put them in the ground, what I mean by indexing again is every foot or every 2 feet they need to be color indexed. Red is hot, black doesn't need to be indexed. It's black, it's hot naturally. Your white for your neutral, and your green for your mechanical ground, or in this case just your ground. Now, how you pull the wire through the pipe before you bury it, that's completely up to you. However you figure the easiest, most efficient means is to do that. But those number 6s drop out of that sub panel box. Again, they drop into the flexible conduit. I think that's 1 inch, I do believe, or 1.25 inches. That sizing is also crucial. You need to make sure you have the right size conduit dropping in the ground for heat. If the conduit's too small and your wires still fit in it, the inspector can fail you because you don't have the right size conduit for heat dissipation from all the heat generated with the number 6 wires while they're underground. Like I said, I do believe this is either 1 inch or 1.25 inch conduit coming out of the bottom of this box. It picks up Schedule 80 PVC rigid pipe, Schedule 40 fitting, 90 degree, drops down into the ground. We'll come back to that in a minute. Labeling is also important. Now the NEC, National Electric Code, has a whole big old book on labeling. But I'm going to show you how I did, and it was found to be good enough. Here's what it looks like. You get on websites. The manufacturer doesn't send you these stickers. You'll have to get on websites and get these stickers. Just mark the solar breakers and the disconnect. There it is. Okay, now again, you see the DC solar circuit. Even though it's an AC line, it was labeled in accordance with DC code. Okay, drops into that Schedule 80, goes underground. I think under driveways and under roadways, it's got to be buried 24 inches. I think. Don't hold me to that. When it's just passing through your yard like mine is, it's just got to be buried 18. I made a video before I buried it because the inspector wasn't available, showing him that I actually ran it underground in Schedule 80 pipe, and I buried it 2 feet, and the wire was indexed. So I didn't have to wait around with an open hole in the ground while it filled up with water while I was waiting on an inspector. Again, I made a video showing that I've buried the Schedule 80 pipe 2 feet in the ground. The wire was indexed prior to it going into the Schedule 80 pipe. And we ran that all the way up here to this little guy. My Schedule 80 comes out of the ground with those 4 number 6s in it and drops into this. This is an outside disconnect box. It's rated at 60 amps. I only needed a 50, but it is rated at 60 amps. You're going to run all 4 of your THHN wires into that, your number 6s. 3 of these wires are going to run continuously. They're just basically going to go in. Your red and your black are going to break on your hot leg for your disconnect. Your neutral is going to go straight through. It's not going to break at all. It just goes in there, makes a little loop, gives you enough to play with, and comes right back down, goes into the house to the main panel. Now your green ground wire is going to go in there. It's going to break on a little ground bus bar. You're going to pick it up again, and it's going to run back into the house. So after you break your red and your black, and you reconnect them, and you break your ground bar and reconnect it, all 3 of those are going to run with your neutral white wire right into your house. As you can see, NEC labeling. Now let's go into the house and see what we got. Alright, now, once you come into the house, we picked up that flexible conduit out of the outside disconnect box. It comes into the house. Let me see if I can show you what size that is for heat dissipation. I can't see it, but that 1.25 inches it looks like. But anyhow, it comes in, drops into the box, and there's your 4 wires again, indexed. You got your green ground. This is where your mechanical ground for your outside breaker box that's on your sub panel array. This is where it picks up your hard ground, okay, inside your house with the rod and the ground outside. That ground comes in here, it lands right on your ground bus bar. Your neutral does the exact opposite, goes over and lands on your neutral, and that's the same thing as your ground. That's where your outside panel box on your solar array picks up its neutral from your house main panel. Now, even though my system's only putting off 40 amps of power continuously, alright, you would think I would need a 40 amp double pole back fed breaker, and that's what, but it's not. Safety concerns with the NEC, they want you to overrate everything so your house doesn't burn down. So what this is, even though I'm only making 40 amps, the NEC has you multiply every solar panel, instead of by 1 amp, they have you multiply it by 1.25 amps, which gives you, well, heck, I can't remember, but maybe 50, maybe a little under, a little over. But that turned into instead of a 40 amp double pole back fed breaker, it turned into a 50 amp double pole back fed breaker. And your remaining 2 number 6 THHN wires coming from the disconnect box into your house, they land right inside of my 50 amp back fed breaker, double pole. And what is special about the back fed breaker? Basically, that screw right there. That's what's special about it. The energy coming into the box from the solar panels, that screw makes sure that breaker can't pop back out of the box. That's your back fed breaker. Oh yeah, something else. Because I'm feeding in from an external source, the NEC says 50 amps. I had to deregulate my main breaker to a 175 amp breaker instead of a 200 amp standard service. When you get the electrical specs, when you get the technical details from your company that you order the panels from, if it's a good reputable company, they'll tell you what to derate to, and they'll tell you how big of a breaker you need down here. Other than that, let me just show you some labeling. These labels, like I said earlier, the company you buy the panels off of is not going to send you labels. If you want labels, you're going to have to get labels from a third party somewhere on the internet. It's such a prevalent thing to do, ordering labels on the internet, that they actually have NEC quick reference guides telling you what labels you need and where at. It makes things real easier. When it gets to labeling, you ain't got to guess or go digging through an NEC code book. You pay 20 bucks, somebody puts everything on a big quick reference paper for you, lets you know where you need all the labels at. Now, like I said, the outside of the box, inside of the box, all right. I think I covered just about everything. Walk over here, check my little quick reference book, make sure I didn't forget to tell you anything, because I know how much of a pain in the butt it can be. You're trying to figure something out. Well, we covered the N-gauge cable, covered the D-rate on the main breaker, I covered the subframe with schedule 40 3-inch pipe, I covered the weave ground clips, XR. Oh, again, with these XR1000 rails, they don't really give you directions with them when they ship them to you. You just kind of got to make sure that when you're running a panel or when you're running a row to mount the solar panels to, make sure those flat ones are facing, the flat sides are facing one another. I tell you what, something else. Down here on the XR1000 rail, there's your bottom clamp that holds your panel in place. Okay, your bottoms all look alike, your tops all look like the bottoms. Now in the middle, it's a little bit different. It looks like that fella right there. That's a middle. There's another one. Well, the sun's out, so let's see if my meter's running backwards. It sure is. This is one of the biggest things I love about these solar panels. When the sun's out, you see how that bi-directional arrow there is going from right to left. Tail is chasing it to the left. Well, that means I'm feeding power back to the solar company. If I had more sun and wasn't running a dryer right now, it'd be going a lot faster. But whenever the solar company or whenever the power company is feeding me, that tail runs from left to right. It's one of the best things about this. Oh, and while we're on the subject, when you go to derate that main breaker, however much you got to derate it to, your power company is going to need to come out and turn off your power. What they do is they just pull your meter right out of the socket. Once you get your system up and ready to turn on, there's a whole bunch of paperwork your power company is going to want you to go through. I'm not going to cover that. That's logistical stuff, administrative stuff. I just showing you how to somewhat put it up. But this meter, it's also going to need to be replaced. You just call your power company whenever your application's done for a grid tie system, and they'll come out and they'll replace your meter with a bi-directional. The cement, that's foundation mix. Cement that we dug in those holes 3 feet in the front, 5 foot in the back. But other than that, pretty sure I'm done. Hope it helps.